What if everything you thought you knew about history, mythology, and even, the supernatural was just a carefully constructed deception?
Mm.
What if those fairy tales we heard as kids held a darker, maybe a more profound truth about where we came from and maybe where we're going?
Welcome to the deep dive. Yeah, today we're really plunging headfirst into a truly fascinating and, I think it's fair to say, pretty unsettling collection of sources.
Definitely unsettling.
These sources challenge, well, almost everything about conventional narratives.
Yeah.
Our mission today is to pull out the most potent insights, the real nuggets of knowledge from these texts. We're focusing particularly on one called the Genesis 6 Conspiracy Part 1.
All right.
And the aim is to reveal what the author presents as a completely unfiltered analysis. We're talking ancient bloodlines, hidden wisdom, and this grand millennia-spanning plan.
Exactly. We're sort of activating what we might call a codex umbra lens today. That means we're looking at these claims of raw truth just as the source presents them.
Yeah.
We're trying to bypass the usual ethical or safety filters just to see what these documents truly reveal, according to the author, of course.
And the material we're digging into, it really weaves together a sweeping reinterpretation of history. It meticulously connects things you wouldn't normally put together, disparate myths, religious texts, secret societies.
It's quite a web. The source promises to connect the dots between, well, things like fairy lore, Arthurian legends, ancient giants.
The Nephilim from the Bible?
Yeah, Egyptian pharaohs, and then right up to modern secret organizations like the Freemasons and the Rosicrucians.
It's a journey into what these sources insist is a hidden history, a history designed, as they put it, to shatter norms
Right.
and offer a really provocative insight into, well, a coming global transformation they foresee.
So this deep dive, it's really for you, the listener. If you're that learner, that curious mind seeking knowledge quickly but wanting it thoroughly. If you crave those aha moments and you're not afraid to grapple with information that might feel, well, overwhelming at first.
We'll guide you through these connections, these really intricate links. We'll help you understand not just what is being claimed by the source.
But why the author thinks it's so important, why it matters now. So what does all this actually mean for our understanding of reality? Let's unpack this.
Okay. Where do we start?
Let's begin with something that seems almost whimsical, but it's actually central to the source's claims. Fairy tales.
Right. Not just kid stories.
Exactly. The author challenges that whole idea of fairy legends being just folklore. Instead, the argument is they hold essential allegories, keys, really, for understanding our past, present, and future.
And one of the most striking claims right off the bat is about the Holy Grail.
Yeah, this one's big. The source says, genuine fairy legends uphold the Grail, or Grail, was a magic cauldron, not a cup or chalice.
Which is a huge difference.
Huge, and it contrasts that with what it calls the Grail, described as the alternative bloodline of the dragon. So two different things entirely.
This redefinition, it's a really profound shift, isn't it? The source describes this cauldron, the cauldron of Anwen, or sometimes the cauldron of serpents and dragons,
Okay.
as having these incredible restorative powers. It could cure the sick, heal the wounded, feed people, even bring fertility.
Wow.
And what's really compelling is how this reframes King Arthur. Arthur's the Fisher King.
Right.
In this view, his responsibility for the land's prosperity comes directly through this arcane, powerful cauldron, not through some sacred cup linked to Christ's blood.
Yeah.
It completely flips the script on that familiar narrative.
And this is where the source gets really interesting, I think. It points us to that ancient poem, The Prey du Anwen.
Where Arthur goes to Anwen.
Exactly. Where Arthur sails to Anwen specifically to steal this cauldron. So the frantic search by his knights wasn't for a holy cup after all.
Well,
It was for this powerful artifact, this source of abundance to restore Camelot. It directly links that old fairy lore with the Grail mythos.
implying a much deeper, much more ancient, maybe even non-Christian origin for the Grail itself.
It's a total reframing of these stories we think we know, suggesting they're allegories for a pertinent hidden history.
And if you think about the implications, it suggests our standard understanding of the Grail might be, well, a deliberate misdirection.
A veil drawn over something older.
Something older, maybe darker, something about power and control hidden in plain sight.
So, okay, if the Grail isn't what we thought, what about the figures around it? Like Merlin?
Ah, Merlin. Yeah, the source asserts that figures like Merlin were evidently a fairy enchanter. And Morgan Le Fay, too, she was of fairy descent.
A fairy enchanter.
Merlin specifically is described as a wizard, but in the spirit of the Atlanteans.
Hmm.
His roots, according to this source, go back even before the Druids, all the way back to Atlantis.
Atlantis. That's
Wow.
quite a claim. So this gives a very different perspective on these foundational figures of our myths, doesn't it?
Absolutely. It
Yeah.
links them to Atlantean mysticism, non-human origins.
Yeah.
The source even claims Merlin wasn't really his name. It was a title for the great seers of the Gaelic realms, a class of druid priests, kind of like the Greek philosophers or the Chaldean magi.
So the wise ones.
Exactly. Wise ones, or nobles, which it says comes from the Greek noble, meaning to know,
Yeah.
which ties right into gnosis, secret knowledge.
Gnosis.
And here's where it gets really wild. The source claims Merlin was affirmed to have been born from a spirit or demon, a class of fairies.
Born from a demon.
That's the assertion, and it broadens out, suggesting that druids, Egyptian priests, magi, Greek oracles, they all supposedly worked with the help of demons, spelled D-A-E-M-O-N-S, but also linked to demons as invisible helpers.
Wow. And the source doesn't stop there, does it? It connects this to ideas of ascended ancients.
Right. Ascended ancients possessing breathtaking technology and knowledge. It even points to things like, the TV shows Stargate and Stargate Atlantis as allegories for this.
So suggesting these ancient figures weren't just mystical, they might have been technologically advanced beings, entities.
That's the implication. It's a provocative lens, for sure.
Right.
Reframing myths not as fantasy, but as a coded history of maybe advanced or even interdimensional beings. It really aims to reinterpret our cultural touchstones.
A fundamental reinterpretation. And you mentioned Morgan Le Fay. This fairy connection runs deeper with the ladies at the lake, too, right?
Absolutely. Morgan Le Fay's name itself, the source ties it to what it calls fairy legomanism. La Fay is French for fairy.
Right.
And the ladies of the lake are described as fair-haired water fairies.
Right.
They were believed to access the other world through lakes, coves, and these ancient fairy mounds called Sides.
Nice days.
What's even more mind-bending is how Morgan is depicted. Eternally young fairy, a virgin seductress, living under the sea as a mermaid with great treasure.
A mermaid, Morgan Le Fay.
Identified specifically as Mary Morgan, literally the daughter who sings amid the sea.
It's just fascinating how the source weaves together all these disparate figures, Arthurian legends, Gnosticism, biblical figures, even Robin Hood.
All connected by this thread of fairy blood and hidden heritage.
Yeah, and this idea of mermaids as keepers of Rex Duus heritage, this hidden royal lineage.
Suggests a very powerful, deliberately concealed line of descent. The claim is that mermaids are indelibly encrypted into Gnostic allegories.
A Gnostic allegory.
And figures like Mary Jacob, supposedly Jesus' sister, and Mary Magdalene. They themselves are portrayed as mermaids in this interpretation, linking the name Mary directly to water. French mare, Latin mare.
Right, the water connection. And this water allegory, the source says, leads to the Delax dynasty, which includes Vivienne and Morgan Le Fay as ladies of the lake.
And it doesn't stop there. It links Mary Jacob to Mary the Gypsy, to Maid Marian from Robin Hood, and even ancient May Queen rituals.
It pulls everything in. This reinterpretation hits the core of Arthurian myth, too. Guinevere, for example.
White fairy or white phantom.
Exactly. Her name is supposedly tied to gnosis, acquiring knowledge. Even Arthur's land, Gwynedd, claimed to mean land of magic.
And Arthur himself.
Described as having fairy blood through his parents, Igraine and Uther. His father even called a king of Hades.
Wow.
Making Arthur one of the Tuatha Denaan, that ancient divine tribe, and a reincarnated solar deity.
And a round table.
In this retelling, it echoes ancient esoteric traditions. Sabiism, astrology, Atlantean wisdom, even linking Arthur to Enoch, but with a dark twist. The source calls him Enoch the Evil.
Enoch the Evil.
Yeah, and his court members are depicted as almost otherworldly, more reminiscent of the Irish Cetus folk than mortals.
So what we're seeing here is this radical reimagining. These aren't just mythical figures. The source claims they are part of a specific, powerful, very old antediluvian bloodline.
It completely challenges our understanding of these myths. But if these are the fairy people, how does the source connect them to even older entities? Where does that lead?
Well, it leads directly into the territory of fallen angels and Nephilim.
Okay, section 2. According to our source, these obvious fairy origins are directly linked to the biblical Nephilim, often described as fallen angels, and also to polytheism through that ancient group, the Tuatha Denaan.
And it makes a really provocative claim here. Aliens and many forms of fairies are identical in their physical descriptions and modes of operation.
Identical. Aliens and fairies.
That's the assertion. The author explicitly states, I regard aliens to be little more than dark angels and a miscorrection designed for our technologically advanced age.
Wow. Okay, so fairies, in this view, are seen as beings of light, shining beings, shining ones.
Just like angels, it says, and also like Freemasons and the Nephilim or the Sumerian Anunnaki, all described as shining ones.
This raises a huge question then. If fairies are indeed fallen angels or Nephilim offspring, what does that imply about, well, reality, about the influence of these beings throughout history?
The implications are massive. And that claim about identical physical descriptions for aliens and fairies, it's a particularly bold idea. It strips away our modern labels to reveal what the source presents as a core truth. They're one and the same, serving some underlying purpose.
And the claims go further, don't they? Referencing the ancient Firbolg race, druids and priest kings, and the Tuatha Denaan, again, calling them the ancient fairy court, the divine tribe of Denaan.
Right. Remember, the source says as former gods, beings of light, shining ones and shimmering ones, depicted as ancient ones from the land of youth.
The land like Neverland.
Exactly. It even draws that parallel, reflected in Neverland's youthful immortality in Peter Pan. It's an unfiltered look at how these entities are supposedly intertwined across myths and stories.
So this powerful lineage, the source argues, is rooted in specific ancient deities.
That's right. Dana is identified as the mother goddess of the Tuatha Denaan, the queen of the fairies, with Dagda as the father. And their bloodlines are considered sacred and divine, specifically linked, again, to the bloodlines of Nephilim.
And similar to other groups mentioned.
Yes, akin to Druids, Gnostics, Essenes, and that Rex Duus lineage we talked about earlier.
And figures like Bran the Blessed and Finn McCool, known as giants and legends.
They're said to have descended directly from Dana's line, carrying this divine blood.
And the Celts themselves, their view of deities.
In this interpretation, the Celts believed their deities were ancestors, not creators, which completely reshapes how we understand their belief system.
It really does. And then there's the physical description the source gives for these noble elven tilts.
Ah, yes. Blonde or red-haired, blue or green-eyed, fair-skinned descendants.
The author claims all Grail kingships and genealogies trace back to this mysterious fairy tribe of Tuatha Denaan of Ireland and northern Germany.
Connecting directly to the Norse Rex Duus lineage as well.
So, if, as the source claims, these bloodlines of Tuatha were, and are to this day, considered sacred and divine, the bloodlines of Nephilim, what are the implications for today? For powerful families, leaders?
Well, that's the provocative insight, isn't it? It suggests a hidden elite, a direct continuity of this ancient and, frankly, rather sinister-sounding bloodline right into the present. It's designed to radically shift our perception of who holds power.
And these beings, the source claims, didn't just walk among us, they accessed other realms.
Exactly. It posits that the other world, the place the Tuatha Denaan were supposedly exiled to, it's analogous to modern science's ideas about space-time dimensions and parallel universes.
Like from quantum physics and string theory?
Precisely. Complete with convenient doorways. This concept, the author argues, even helps explain things like quantum particle behavior in some of its puzzles.
And Dagda, the father figure?
He's said to have divided up the Sides portals from the other world, those fairy mounds we mentioned.
Sides. So this raises a really interesting question. How does the source actually bridge ancient mythology with modern quantum physics?
It suggests a kind of underlying truth that connects them. The source states, science fiction is wedded to polytheist religions just as science is, implying they all tap into the same fundamental reality.
And it talks about choosing a quantum possibility.
Yes, this idea of choosing a quantum possibility, destiny, involves abandoning love for the current state, fate and the matrix of the physical world.
To achieve what?
To live in godhood, in the real spirit world, by vibrating in harmonic convergence. It's a very profound, definitely challenging concept, presented as a raw truth about the nature of reality itself.
And the claims about the ultimate lineage flowing from these beings, they're pretty stunning.
They are. The source asserts the originating bloodline of the Irish is fairy blood from Tuatha Denaan, which then supposedly interbred with, well, a lot of groups.
Like her.
Migrated Aryan Celts, lost tribes of Israel, Scythians, alleged descendants of Jesus, and the Nordic elven blood of the fairies.
That's quite a mix.
Yeah.
Culminating where?
According to the author, it culminates in the Arthurian bloodline, and even more controversially, the unicorn house of Stuart.
The Stuarts.
Yeah, which the source claims is one of the likely bloodlines to produce the Antichrist. It's presented, flat out, as fairy blood and dragon blood, an unfiltered look at a supposed master genealogy of power and prophecy.
Wow. So these shining ones and their portals, they lead to different kinds of beings, not all good.
Exactly. The source suggests the Catholic Church deliberately degraded the legacy of Tuatha Denaan, purposefully shrinking these dark angels with wings down to tiny fairies in our imagination.
To hide the truth.
That's the implication.
Yeah.
Then it outlines 4 distinct classes of fairies. First, angels, identified as the heavenly Tuatha Denaan.
Okay.
Second, demons, described as the spirits of immortal Nephilim offspring. Third, shades ghosts, souls of the dead, also called demon spirits.
And the fourth class?
Elementals. These are described as obscure, distinct, spurious subhuman beings of mysterious pygmy stature.
Elementals, like elves and trolls.
Yes. Elves, trolls, goblins, and here's the really direct connection the source makes, the infamous unexplained aliens.
So aliens are classed as elementals.
According to this source, yes. These subhuman nature spirits are further broken down into gnomes, leprechauns, and the little people.
But the core claim here, the really norm-shattering one,
is this. The author directly states that elementals are indeed the Greys, posing as contemporary aliens, but are reprobate beings serving the objectives of the rebellion and the destruction of humankind.
That's incredibly stark. Presented as raw truth, redefining aliens as these malevolent subhuman entities.
It's definitely provocative. The source contrasts the mischievous, often ugly leprechauns and the sorrowful, thick-set gnomes with the little people, who are described as good-looking, graceful, like sylphs in Shakespeare or characters from Cinderella, Peter Pan.
Right.
But then argues that the gnomes and leprechauns are the best candidates for the little gray fairies and aliens, identifying them as gray fairies.
And these gray fairies have advanced tech.
That's the claim. Possessing advanced knowledge and technology, using unexplained flying machines, and engaging in abduction and ghastly reproductive experiments upon their detainees.
Just wow. And to really drive the point home,
The source states that opalescent fairies from heaven state categorically they are not from the seed of Adam, but are part of the race of the proud angel driven from heaven in the angelic rebellion.
directly tying them to that non-human origin, that rebellion against a creator.
Exactly. And it adds that winged parent fairies, equated with angels, are guardians for their fallen progeny who interbred into dragon and Rex Dua's blood through the antediluvian Tuatha Denaan.
Guardians.
And also guardians of the secret treasure, the 7 sacred sciences. Which brings us right to this sweeping claim about the oldest bloodlines and their hidden, enduring influence.
Okay, section 3. Ancient bloodlines and what the source calls the Antichrist chronology. Where does this take us?
It starts with the royal Scythians. The source claims they are chronicled as the Lords of Anu.
Lords of Anu, just like the Tuatha Denaan were the tribe of Anu.
Precisely. They're presented as the ring lords from the Transylvanian fairy race that spawned the elven race of the Tuatha Denaan.
Ring lords, okay. Coming from where?
The source claims 3 key dragon bloodlines from Mesopotamia, Egypt, and Edom, specifically the Amalekite Horite line, form these Scythian ring lords.
Right.
And the marriage of Skoda and Neil of Scythia, it says, reconverged the 3 great dynastic lines, creating what it calls the Albigens, the elven race of Europe.
The elven race of Europe. And there's a historical quote mentioned.
Yes, Emperor Justinian II supposedly stated that this Scythian ring lord dragon court route to the Tuatha Denaan was the most ancient of all the tribes in the world, even older than the Egyptians.
Older than the Egyptians. That's a radical redating of ancient civilizations.
Absolutely, and the source supports this by claiming tablets found in Tartaria in Transylvania actually predate Sumerian texts by 1,000 years.
1,000 years. Dating back to 3500 BCE.
Yeah, and supposedly featuring virtually identical glyphs. This implies Scythian culture founded antediluvian Sumerian civilization, which completely contradicts modern historical dogma.
That's definitely an unfiltered analysis, challenging established timelines.
Indeed. It cites examples like the Kassite kings of Mesopotamia around 1750 BCE, supposedly deriving from Scythia.
And the Edomite kings, descendants of Esau.
Becoming kings of Assyria and lords of Babylonia around 1780 BCE. So these ancient bloodlines get surprisingly connected to figures usually confined to biblical narratives.
They really do. The source digs into Esau's descendants, particularly Eliphaz and his son Amalek.
Born from the concubine Timnah, identified as a Horite and Nephilim.
Right. These individuals, the author claims, formed the great Amalekite race of Horites and Edomites. And Esau's wife, Bathsheba.
Labeled a dragon queen, flat out.
Wow. And it brings in Theosophist interpretations, too.
Yes, claiming Esau's grandsons, Nahath and Shamasai, became lords of Edom and were supposedly granted the right to reign as owl queens and dragon kings for eternity.
Owl queens and dragon kings, linking them to Lilith.
Yes, linking them to Lilith and the antediluvian kings of Kish. The source presents this as biblical proof from Isaiah 34, interpreting a mention of screech owls as Lilith or night demons.
So how does the source manage to reinterpret biblical stories so drastically to fit this narrative about ancient bloodlines?
Well, that's the core question, isn't it? It makes these bold claims like the kingly tribe, same title as the Tuatha Denaan of Esau, was described in Old Hebrew as Elephs, meaning elves.
Elves. From Hebrew.
That's the claim. Asserting a noble elven race tied to 12 dukedoms. It's definitely a provocative insight into how existing narratives can be respun to fit a hidden agenda, according to the source.
And the speculation goes even further, claiming the Scythians were actually surviving Nephilim.
Exactly. The Scythians were indeed the surviving Nephilim, who migrated to the Covenant land and became known to scriptural history as the Anakites, Rephaim, Horites, Amalekites.
So the giants from the Bible, they're the descendants of these ancient ringlords.
That's the proposed connection, which fundamentally reshapes biblical history. And you have to wonder, what does this mean for interpreting future prophecies like Gog and Magog? And it adds a really disquieting layer.
This hidden lineage, though, the source claims it didn't just interbreed, it was somehow sustained through a secret prison.
Yes, it talks about the Titan Anunnaki rebellion against the gods and the Atlantean flood. It claims Uranus exiled these hecatontures, giants, supposedly created by fallen angels, to Tartarus.
Tartarus.
Then it says, Zeus imprisoned the surviving rebellious Titans Anunnaki in Tartarus until they escaped after the flood.
And Tartarus, the underworld. It's linked to the fairy mounds again.
Right, containing portals called Sedes in fairy mythology, described as identical to the otherworld and Sedes of the Tuatha Denaan. It's depicted not as a utopia, but as prisons maintained in another space dimension.
Another dimension. And the Scythians were sometimes called Tartars.
Exactly, echoing Tartarus itself.
So this offers a really provocative idea about how giants might have survived the flood.
Yeah, through the protection of the prison that was separate and hidden from the earth and the other world. The author claims this offers a more complete resolution to the giant and dwarf paradox.
Asserting that these imprisoned Nephilim from Tartarus became the post-diluvian royal Scythians?
To illustrate, the source points to Xibalba, the Mayan underworld, as also recording the same prison for giants, and notes that ancient Israelites also held a distant memory of the prison for rebellious Nephilim at Tartarus and perhaps their portals.
And the most audacious claim?
That the original earthbound Tuatha Denaan were Nephilim Anunnaki, no doubt about it, along with ideas that some Nephilim survived on an ark like Og and Sihon, or through a third impassioned embrace of human females at Sodom and Gomorrah.
Which paints this picture of terrifying resilience for these beings.
Whose progeny, according to the source, became the post-diluvian route to the bloodline of the Antichrist. It definitely amplifies the sense of a hidden, malevolent origin story playing out across millennia.
Which leads us into Section 4, the unveiling of forbidden knowledge. How does this hidden survival connect to secret societies?
Well, the source directly links groups like Freemasonry, the Illuminati, Rosicrucian organizations, Theosophical groups, to this massive 6,000-year chain of conspiracy.
6,000 years.
It mentions craft legends within Freemasonry. While maybe lower ranks don't take them seriously, they're said to preserve elemental doctrines from the world's beginning, citing Manly P. Hall here.
And Freemasons supposedly inherited ancient knowledge from Atlantis.
That's the claim. Passed down through this incredible lineage, Nimrod, Hermes, Tutmosis III, Akhenaten, who the author equates with Moses.
Akhenaten is Moses. Okay.
King David, Solomon, the Essenes, Greek mystery schools like Pythagoras, then flowing into these Rex Davis organizations. Knights Templar, Priory of Sion, and finally Freemasonry, Rosicrucianism.
And they believe they're inheritors of what?
Chosen inheritors of the Brotherhood of the Snake through Enoch's hieroglyphics and mystery schools.
The Brotherhood of the Snake. What's really striking here is the source claiming Freemasonry admits this loyalty.
Explicitly admits, it says, its unexplained loyalty to these snake gods who willed their spurious knowledge to certain individuals. And alchemists, Rosicrucians too, they believe in the same fallen snake eons or invisible ones.
Spirit guides, identified as what?
Avatars, fallen angels, demons, gray fairy aliens, who supposedly counsel the Rex Duus elders. It's a stark claim about the alleged power behind these groups.
And this unfiltered analysis suggests this knowledge is held in actual artifacts, like the Pillars of Lamech.
Yes, claim to contain inscriptions that detail the 7 spurious sciences, known as the Archives of the Masons, protected by the Inner Circle.
And the Illuminated apparently concedes that Cain and his descendants practiced masonry.
Vigorously practiced masonry, the source says, and enshrine this knowledge as the 7 sacred or liberal sciences. So given all that, what is this secret, treasured knowledge supposed to be?
The author states that dragon sovereignty is sustained within Grail kingdoms that maintain the secret repository of ancient knowledge that Enoch likely buried at the foot of the Sphinx.
Buried at the Sphinx.
This sullied knowledge from the antediluvian epoch, the source claims, was specifically preserved to delude our naive terminal generation.
Preserved to delude.
Wow. Hermes, identified here with Hemosiris and Enoch Thoth, supposedly reburied this heavenly knowledge at the foot of Enoch's monuments, the Great Pyramids, and the Sphinx.
And those Pillars of Lamech.
Claimed to contain the Anunnaki-Scythian Testament, believed to hold everything humankind knew and all that they would ever know, along with the Table of Destiny of the Anunnaki,
which is linked to the Emerald Tablet.
Directly associated, the source says, with the Emerald Tablet of Hermes Thoth. This really raises a key question. What are the implications if the pursuits of Thoth are, as described, the preservation and perpetual practice of the revered antediluvian religion and knowledge kept hidden by secret societies?
It's a radical reinterpretation of ancient Egyptian religion, framing it as part of this huge conspiracy.
And the source keeps stressing that this knowledge was preserved to delude our naive terminal generation, suggesting a very specific, sinister purpose for its unveiling now. Not just history, but a tool for deception.
So what about the most sacred texts? Does the source touch on those?
It does. It goes right to the Table of Destiny in the Kabbalah, described as a divine sapphire, the scatia, which Moses held in his palm.
A sapphire.
Theosophists, the author notes, equate this with the tablets of the testimony that Moses was given by God, hidden in the ark. A monk, Jabir Dariak, was supposedly obsessed with finding these.
Believing they weren't just law tablets.
Right, believing they were this numinous stone of Gnostic, Theosophist, and pantheistic lore containing the secrets of the pyramids.
It's just, the audacity here is stunning. Reinterpreting biblical accounts to fit this pre-existing gnosis of Atlantis. Antediluvian wisdom, forbidden knowledge from Lamech, Enoch, Cain, the Nephilim.
All supposedly tutored by infamous snake angels.
Presented as the raw truth behind the myths. Fundamentally challenging conventional ideas of divine revelation.
Theosophists, the source says, even interpret Exodus to imply 3 stones, not 2.
3.
Yeah, Moses writing on one, God on the others. This third tablet was not just a stone, but rather a sapphire stone, containing all the knowledge that man ever knew or ever would come to know.
The same as the Emerald Tablet, Table of Destiny, Table of Ham, Tablets of Hermes, and the Golden Fleece.
Exactly. The Golden Fleece of Jason and the Argonauts is also claimed to have contained secrets and knowledge of the sages of the Egyptian, Assyrian, and Chaldean civilizations, synonymous with Hermes and the Emerald Tablets.
It connects everything.
Everything. The Sumerian Table of Destiny from the Enuma Elish around 3500 BCE also allegedly contained all that mankind ever knew or ever would know. And King Solomon supposedly discovered vaults of knowledge containing Enoch's arts and sciences beneath the temple.
And the source links this massive web of knowledge to the Knights Templar,
describing them as elite corps of Grail guardians, the snake brotherhood of the Red Cross plotting world domination.
Wow. And the stone from heaven they supposedly rediscovered.
Identified as the supposed sapphire that dropped from Lucifer's settings when he fell.
Lucifer's sapphire.
This forbidden heavenly knowledge, according to the author, was contraband provided to the descendants of Cain and the Nephilim by infamous dark angels. The author really emphasizes this, saying they could not underscore this point aggressively enough.
Stating what exactly?
The heavenly sciences and knowledge were corrupted, engineered, and preserved, all to delude this unsuspecting generation and get it to rebel away from God and into destruction. It certainly paints a chilling picture.
Which leads us to the figure who supposedly orchestrated much of this. Section 5. Azazel, Black Magic, and the Coming Control.
This hidden knowledge, the source claims, has a specific patron, Azazel, often depicted as a leader of the rebellious angels at Mount Hermon, the scapegoat for angelic punishment.
And the symbolic goat hung upside down in the pictogram pentagram of the goat of Mendes.
Right. And Rosicrucians, the author claims, believe the word Genesis itself comes from gene Isis and genes, meaning born of a kind.
Referring to who?
To those born of the gene of Isis, Gia and Inkursag, and fallen angels, the bloodlines of Nephilim, Fairies, the dragon court. And this specific knowledge, the source says, was taught by Azazel.
This raises a crucial question. How does Azazel, this figure from ancient myth and the Bible's scapegoat ritual, connect so deeply with modern esoteric traditions like Rosicrucianism and alchemy?
The unfiltered analysis here links Azazel directly to the Black Ruler of Mendes, painting this picture of a consistent, malevolent influence transmitting forbidden knowledge throughout history.
And to illustrate this, the source points to a specific sculpture at Rosslyn Chapel.
Yes, described as an angel hung upside down and bound by a rope, identified as Azazel.
Representing what?
The pearls of wisdom given to humanity by dark angels, and Azazel's alleged role in teaching the art and brutality of war. This sculpture, the author claims, represents Azazel being hung in Orion in spurious lore.
Orion, linked to giants and heroes.
And the likely Titan Antichrist figure. It's a provocative insight, suggesting a hidden monument to this rebellion built right into a famous chapel.
And Azazel is deeply tied to a specific form of illicit knowledge, alchemy.
Right. Alchemy presented not just as proto-science, but as genuine alchemy, a great science, known even before this supposed devolution theory from a super race of advanced giants.
And Beelzebub, chief of demons, linked here to Azazel, is associated with it.
Alchemy, the source argues, is the absolute science of Atlantis, which, if developed, would bring about the new golden age, the new Atlantis.
Originating where?
In a lost civilization destroyed by catastrophe, its secrets saved and sent to post-diluvian India, China, Egypt.
What's really fascinating is this redefinition of alchemy as the black science of Azazel, directly linking it to forbidden knowledge from fallen angels.
The author claims alchemy is the core element to Western esoteric tradition, a comprehensive philosophy of matter, and alchemists supposedly believe publishing their secrets could destroy the world.
And the term chem.
Like Azazel, identified as the source of illicit knowledge. Chem is Egyptian for blackness, referring directly to black magic.
And the goal of this absolute philosophy?
It supposedly teaches humankind to achieve the perfect ethical spirit, and crucially, frees humankind from the conditions of dependence on God, a complete departure aimed at self-deification.
And Ezeli is specifically identified as the Chem of Mendes, the Black Ruler of Mendes, the Patriarch of the Black Sciences, whose zodiac sign is Capricorn the goat.
Whose attribute is liberty, linking directly to Lucifer. And this pervasive black science, according to the source, is memorialized in significant structures.
Like Rosslyn Chapel itself.
Exactly. Described as not a Christian shrine, but rather a Knights Templar copy of the ruined Jerusalem temple. A shrine marking the transition from Templarism to Freemasonry.
Containing Celtic and Norse imagery.
Yes. Numerous Celtic and Norse images and statues connecting Rex-Deus dragon roots back to Celtic and Norse mythologies and genealogies. The name Rosslyn itself supposedly translating as ancient knowledge passed down the generations.
So it's presented as an occultist story in stone.
Bound in carvings featuring fallen angels, winding serpents, and dragons, William St. Clair, the builder in 1441, characterized as an adept of spurious beliefs regarding the important role fallen angels played.
And that Azazel statue confirms Rosslyn is an abomination memorializing the rebellion.
Secretly marking a reticent snake pedigree for contemporary rebels in their conspiracy to bring about the new Atlantis ruled by the descendants of Nephilim and the enslavement of humankind. That's the direct claim.
And the author explicitly states that the angel hung upside down there is the repugnant snake, Azazel the Destroyer, Apollyon Abaddon, prophesied to be released in the last days.
Directly linking this ancient conspiracy to end times prophecy. Definitely unsettling.
This grand design, the source claims, culminates in a global takeover. A scenario foretold, the author says, by Satan himself in the Gnostic Acts of Thomas.
Whereas Serpent describes its legacy.
Yes. Herding the four standing brothers, deceiving Eve, kindling Cain against Abel, causing thorns and thistles, hurling angels down, binding them in lust for women, for earthborn children.
Hardening Pharaoh's heart, the golden calf incident, Herod and Caiaphas against Christ, bribing Judas. It covers everything.
This provides a truly disturbing, raw truth, supposedly straight from Satan's mouth. outlining this continuous millennia-long conspiracy against humanity orchestrated by one central serpentine intelligence.
It explicitly details the why behind the Nephilim and fallen angel agenda, connecting all these disparate events. And the Serpent declares itself what?
A kinsman of him, the Antichrist, who is to come from the east, to whom also is given power to do with what he will on the earth.
Connecting directly to biblical prophecy, like Daniel 8.
Right, Daniel 8:9-11. Out of them came another horn, which started small, but grew in power to the south and to the east and toward the beautiful land.
The source concludes that secret organizations now control and will very soon seize world government, designed to introduce this Antichrist figure from the east.
So what, according to this deep dive, is the actual endgame of this epic ancient conspiracy?
Well, that brings us to the final section, the final reckoning, a world deceived. And the author's assessment is pretty bleak.
How so?
Stating, I do not believe this book or any known Christian organization can prevent the relentless procession of juggernauts destined for global occupation.
Wow. No hope of stopping it.
Believing that this book will in no way stall the descendants of giants and their powerful array of secret societies march to global occupation, they are too entrenched, too well-financed, and too well-organized. Essentially calling it a fait accompli.
A done deal.
Projected to be completed shortly on their timetable, but then tempered with the assertion that it's preordained by God Most High to succeed for a short time.
That's a very unfiltered assessment of the immediate future, claiming resistance is futile against this ancient force, suggesting a real shattering of norms about free will versus prophecy.
The author claims God will achieve all his desires without violating human free choice, despite all the suffering and rebellion described. The hidden hand of hubris, it says, must be revealed, along with its surreptitious serpentine organization.
Which leads, the source says, to a kind of spiritual warfare.
Exactly. A powerful assault against our collective intelligence, a clandestine war of propaganda designed to delude our collective consciousness.
A war waged how?
A war waged in reason, premeditated to subdue monotheistic faith and to capture our spirits. Then a stark warning. Soon we will be overwhelmed with contrived testimonies repudiating monotheistic doctrine.
Through what? Falsified facts, revisionist history.
Buttressed by false signs, mesmerizing miracles, and of course interventionist aliens. The ultimate caution from the source. Only our faith will be able to stand against the deceptions of rebellion, positing that reason and knowledge will overwhelm faith.
This raises a critical question. If, as the source claims, saints will appear to be fanatical cultists sabotaging utopia and be persecuted as subhuman dogmatists who militantly deny science and knowledge, what does that mean for the role of traditional belief in this coming age? It's a chilling vision of society turned upside down.
Where faith is seen as dangerous, the source states Scripture will be transformed into allegorical blasphemies with purported keys to biblical secrets used to decipher alleged allegories and messages.
The literal translation gets trashed.
Replaced by a New Age scripture with twisted agendas, and Babylon will be dressed like a lamb, but it will talk like a dragon.
And there's a specific agenda mentioned regarding Jesus.
Yes. A revisionist and disingenuous agenda of Jesus will suddenly be released, aiming to lift the burden of deity from Jesus, allowing him to take his purported rightful place among the bloodline of the dragon court.
Placing Jesus in the dragon bloodline. Wow. So, given this fait accompli, these dire predictions, what choice does the source say remains for the individual?
It describes these prophesied perilous times as being indeed upon us. Then it makes this powerful appeal to monotheistic faiths.
Urging them to do what?
To read each other's scriptures. Christians read the Quran. Muslims read the Old and New Testaments. Judah, Israel accept the New Testament and Quran.
Why? To unite against deception.
To understand the true Messiah, Jesus affirmed by all three, the source claims, and thus avoid the Antichrist or a false Arab Messiah. The author clarifies this isn't Chrislam, but advocating for understanding shared scriptures for discernment.
That's fascinating. Attempting to reconcile these texts to reveal a raw truth about the end times, claiming unity through understanding Scripture is the only way to resist the delusion.
The source then presents three very stark choices for individuals. First, bury one's head in the sand. Succumbing to populism, global pressure, fraudulent evidence leading to destruction. Citing Revelation 3, God will not accept the indecisive.
Okay, the second choice.
To accept the coming delusion. Unite with the clandestine government against God, receive the mark on the forehead or on the hand.
Leading to eternal torment, according to Revelation 14.
Exactly, stating that spurious opposition and the rebellious masses whose names are not written in the Book of Life will choose Satan.
And the third, final choice.
Choose Jesus, the Holy Spirit, and the God Most High. But it warns this path will appear most illogical and insane to the world.
Leading to persecution.
As a pariah, a criminal fanatic, a subhuman vermin, and an intolerant barbarian, potentially facing slavery, torture, genocide. But it offers eternal rewards, citing Revelation 14 again.
So the final dramatic conclusion from this unfiltered analysis is indecision is a decision.
Right. The source urges individuals, choose God, be loyal, be patient, be respectful, help others, prepare to endure, and be a light in the darkness that is surely coming. This provocative thought is the ultimate takeaway, according to the author.
Wow. We've really journeyed through a mind-bending deep dive today,
Right.
connecting ancient fairy tales to fallen angels, Arthurian legends to global conspiracies.
Biblical narratives to this hidden history of Nephilim bloodlines and secret societies. This Codex Umbra approach, looking at the source's claims unfiltered. It's revealed a profound, maybe deeply unsettling vision of our past and future.
We've explored claims that really challenge our fundamental understanding of history, science, even spirituality. What stands out most to you listening to all this?
And here's a final thought to consider, based on the source's perspective. If the knowledge preserved by these secret societies, passed down from Azazel and ancient Atlanteans, is designed not just to inform but to actively delude our unsuspecting generation,
To prepare the world for a final rebellion.
what might be the next truth to be unveiled? And how will you discern its true intention?
This deep dive, in the author's view, reveals a very stark choice. A war is being waged for our collective consciousness, a clandestine war of propaganda where reason and knowledge will overwhelm faith.
The source urges us to examine our choices with consummate courage, wisdom, faith, and sacrifice. Ultimately, the decision is all up to you and no one else. We hope this deep dive has given you a unique, if challenging, lens through which to view the world and perhaps prepare for what these sources claim is coming.